In this Photoshop tutorial, I'm going to show you exactly how to retouch a person's face. Now, there's certain things you should do and certain things you definitely should not do, and I'm going to cover these. I'm also going to show you the correct order of doing things. How do you start? What's the workflow? And then I'm going to show you some great high-end retouching techniques that are going to make anybody look better. Hey, I'm Colin Smith from Photoshop Cafe, the best place to learn Photoshop, whether you're a beginner or you're advanced. And also check out our tutorials at photoshopcafe.com. If you're new, you might want to hit that subscribe button right now. So what we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at how to retouch a person's face. What we're going to do is we're going to go through the different steps and the workflow. I'm going to show you a bunch of different techniques and tips. So here's a photograph that I shot in my LA studio with Lena, who was kind enough to model for me for these particular photographs. So we're going to retouch this in a way that you could use it in a high-end situation, where you could use it for stock or you could use it for working with a client and professional work. So there's certain things you don't want to do, like blur the skin, over brighten the eyes. You'll see in a second what I'm talking about. There's things that just destroy the photographs and make them look amateur right away. One of the things you can always be sure of here at Photoshop Cafe is I'm going to teach you industry standard techniques that are actually going to hold up with real work. Now, let's have a look at the process of retouching her. We're going to start here inside of Adobe Camera Raw. So this is directly out of camera right now. So what we want to do first of all is we're going to go to the camera calibration. And under the camera profile right now, we're going to see Adobe Standard. But if we go here, each camera is going to have its own settings, but camera portrait, this is a Canon I'm shooting with, and this is a good starting place. We just want to get that profile right. Now we're going to go in and just do some basic adjustments. So one of the things I want to do is just play around with the exposure. If we look here, and our histogram's a little bit bright, so I'm just going to bring this back just a touch, just so we can see a little bit more in her skin tone there. And on the white balance, for example, right now it's as shot. We could choose daylight for the white balance, is probably going to be most accurate because I was using daylight balanced lights when I was shooting them, which is 5500 Kelvin. Now, sometimes people like to tweak this a little bit and just warm it up just a little touch. Maybe 5600 or somewhere around there can also be quite appealing. And in this case, I'm going to reset the tint 0. So this is a good starting place as far as our tones. I don't want to do a lot with the contrast or the shadows and highlights. Maybe we could recover the highlights just a little bit. And if you feel like things were a little plugged up, you could slightly open up the shadows. But don't go too far at this stage here. Now, we're not going to adjust any more of these. We're not going to add contrast at this point, and we definitely don't want to be doing clarity or vibrance at this point of the process. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to click to open the image. And let's zoom in a little bit. And in fact, why don't I grab my magnifying glass and we're going to zoom right into her face, because this is where we're going to focus mostly in this tutorial right here. We're going to focus on retouching her face. All right, so here's the strategy. There's some things to know about retouching. The first thing is when we talk about ethics, like people sometimes shrink down bones and things like that and make people look unnaturally skinny or like they're made out of elastic. It's not a good look. So here's one of the rules of thumb that people use a lot when it comes to portrait retouching. If something is temporary, such as a pimple or something like that, we can remove it. If something is permanent, such as that person's bone structure, we should not be changing that. Now, there's certain things we can do. Say, for example, if someone's like this, it makes their neck look a little bit more, a little fatter. And if they bring their chin out a little bit, that will slim the neck. So we can do things like slimming necks and things like that, where the pose is not necessarily flattering. Sometimes you just want to use a picture of a better pose from that series. If you don't have it, we can look at things like that. Maybe, you've got a little bit of winter fat. You can slim that down a little bit, but be very careful. There's other things such as wrinkles. We don't want to completely remove wrinkles, but we can reduce their appearance. For example, if I'm side-lighting something like this, it's going to show the wrinkles more because it shows the texture. If you're front lighting with something like a beauty dish or a softbox right in the front, it's going to even out those wrinkles. So if you were shooting a more dramatic lighting and it enhanced those wrinkles, we could reduce those, and that's not ethically wrong. We're not doing anything bad at this point here. The second part of the strategy is we want to start big and then get smaller and smaller and smaller detail. So the first thing we're looking at here is we wanted to just get the overall brightness, which is what we did in Camera Raw. If you're not working in Camera Raw, you could do the same thing here in curves or levels and just even it out a little bit. So now we're going to move on to the next step. The next step is to get rid of the obvious here where we can see we've got some pimples, and I want to reduce the appearance of those pimples right now. So let's have a look at doing this. What we want to do is create a new layer, because we always want to be working on a new layer. We want this to be a non-destructive way of working. Now we're going to go in here and we're going to grab our healing brush tool. And then with our healing brush, we're going to go in here and we're going to reduce these down a little bit. Before we do though, we want to make sure that we are sampling here, which is going to be the current and below. So that means it's going to be sampling from this layer underneath. Otherwise it would be a blank layer and we wouldn't get anything. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hold down the Alt or the Option key, and we can see up here we've got some just pimples. We're just going to go over here and just reduce these a little bit. And these are kind of enhanced a little bit because we can see just kind of the way the lighting is. So at this point here, you're just going to go in and just work on those. And I'm holding the Alt key or the Option key to sample. And I'm resampling quite a lot. Now, one of the things you'll notice about this type of retouching is it might not look like you're actually doing anything at this point. You know, if you're looking at it, it might just look like, well, you know, he's doing nothing. But let's have a look and see what we've done so far. Before and after, you can see it does start to build up over time. So if it looks retouched, it's overdone. You don't want your images to look retouched. And let me talk about the brush settings quickly here. What I want to do is go under here and I'm going to make sure that this brush is turned down to a softer brush. And, you know, we want to increase our size a little bit just so it kind of covers. And we're going to hit the Alt or the Option key, and now we can paint. See that? There we go. All right, so I think you start to get the idea. We've kind of done that. Now, one of the things to be aware of is always resampling. Don't just sample once and then paint. Keep resampling from different areas that look very similar, and you're going to get a much more natural result. So let's move on to the next step now, which is working on things like wrinkles. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to create another blank layer here, and we're just going to do the same thing, except now we're going to focus on our wrinkles. So let me just hit the Alt or the Option key. Now this might freak you out a little bit. What we're going to do is we are going to get pretty heavy-handed with this right now. We're just going under the eyes there, and we're just picking up these wrinkles. You can start to drag a little bit using this tool now. Whereas with the pimple reduction, I didn't drag, I just dotted with it, dabbed with it basically. Okay, so I've just kind of reduced those wrinkles under the eyes there. And it looks a little unnatural right now. If we look at it before and after, you can see, you know, those really need to be there. So what we're going to do is just take our opacity down a little bit. So they're still going to be there. But what we're doing is we're just reducing their appearance a little bit. So right now I'm at about 55%. And that's what we've got right now. So if we look at before and after, you can see what we're starting to do. We can continue with this and get really, really detailed. And, you know, especially when you're doing high-end work, you'll zoom in even closer and you can spend a lot of time getting very, very detailed. In this case, you know, it's not going to be in print on a magazine cover or anything like that. I'm going to get a little bit more subtle. So the next phase we're going to work on is we're going to even out the coloring in the skin. Now, some people like to use frequency separation, which is a good technique. And in fact, I'll do another tutorial on it. But in this case, we're not going to do frequency separation. We're going to do dodging and burning to even out the skin. And let's do that right now. First of all, why don't I select these two layers and just hit Control G for group. And that would be Command G on Mac. And we're just going to call this retouch, just to kind of keep things a little bit more organized. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a curves adjustment. So we're going to go under curves. And then under the curves adjustment, let's bring this here. I'm just going to go in here and I'm just going to brighten it up a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to call this one Dodge. and I'm going to hide it. And now we're going to create another adjustment layer. Go under the adjustment, go under curves. And this time we're going to make it a little bit darker. We're going to pull it down. And we're going to call this one burn. If you can't remember, just remember you can burn toast and it gets darker. Also, I have a much more comprehensive tutorial on dodging and burning. So I'll link to that right now in the comments underneath with all the show notes from what I'm doing here. And also I'm going to link to it in a card up there so you can check out the dodging and burning. All right, so let's have a look. What we want to do though is we want to turn these off so we only paint where we want to lighten or darken. And the way to do that is to choose that layer mask, and then we can hit Control I, that would be Command I on Mac, and that fills the mask with black, which hides the contents. So let's do the same thing with the burn. And now it's just going to hide the contents. Now I'm just going to select both of these and hit Control G or Command G on Mac, and we'll call it DB for dodge and burn. And we're going to open it up again. Just keeps things together. All right, so why don't we start right now with the dodging or the lightning. So we're going to click on dodge here, and then we want to make sure we have a white brush selected. So let's grab our brush, make sure the foreground's set to white, and make sure the softness is turned down, or the hardness is all the way down to make it a soft brush. And we're going to play around with the size. That's not a bad size. We're going to keep changing that as we work, and I can just use the left bracket key to make it smaller, right bracket key to make it bigger. And what we're going to do is drop the opacity here. I'm going to drop this opacity down to 3. I'm going to tap the 3 key, drops it down to 30%. It's a good place to start. Also the flow, we're going to drop this flow down quite a bit. Now, why am I using flow? Because I'm using a Wacom tablet. As you can see here, I'm using a Wacom Intuos Pro, medium sized. And I did a review on this recently, and I'll also link that under the comments section. And the great thing about using that is we've got pressure sensitivity on the pen, which means the harder we press, the more of the effect will happen, and we can paint lightly and we get less effect. Now you can retouch using a mouse, but it's very difficult. If you're doing a lot of retouching, I definitely recommend getting one of these. Now the other thing is the flow. What the flow does is as we hold it down, it will continue to flow like an airbrush. So that's what flow does versus just straight opacity. So let's have a look at doing that right now. We're working with the dodging, which is our lightening up. And what we're trying to do is just even out our skin tones right now. We're at 50%. I want to zoom into 100%. One of the ways to do it is to double click the magnifying glass tool there, and that will zoom into 100%. And now you can see here, you know, there's more retouching we could have done, but I don't want to be here for hours. I just want to show you the technique so you can go ahead and work on your own. So we can see we've got a little bit of patchiness or a little bit of blotchiness going on with the skin there. But it can be a little hard to tell what's going on. And one of the easy ways we can do that is to actually just get rid of the color for now. So we're going to preview this in Grayscale so we can see it a lot easier. And this is how I like to do this, is just go into the new layer. We go to the very top. And I'm going to hold down the Alt or the Option key. And I'm going to click on the new layer. And I'm just going to call this one GS for Grayscale. Now, when we create the new layer by holding the Option key, it gives us options here. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the blend mode here to color. So all we're going to do now is this is only going to affect the color, and it's not going to affect anything else. So let's click OK. And notice nothing has happened. I'm just going to move us to the top here. That's because we haven't filled it yet. So I'm going to hit the D key to reset the foreground and background colors. Now, I could choose black or white or any shade of gray. It doesn't matter. I just want to make sure that I fill it. In fact, why don't I hit the Shift, Delete, and we'll open up the fill here. As long as it has no color, everything's going to work good. So we can choose, 50% gray, black, white. It won't matter. Let's do the gray and click OK. And then when we do that now, because we're in color mode, it's only going to show the grayscale information, which makes it easier for us to see these areas where it's a little bit patchy and not so smooth. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go under the dodge. I'm going to grab my brush, and I want to kind of dodge this. Now, there's certain areas where I want some shadow, like under the cheekbones, because that kind of defines the face. So you don't want to get rid of all of that. You just want to kind of even it out a little bit. So, areas like this here, we can just kind of paint this in, and we're just kind of smoothing it a little bit, just evening it up. Now you can also do a very similar thing as I mentioned before with frequency separation. However, you got to be careful with frequency separation because people can tend to overdo it sometimes, and then it just kind of looks like this layer of wax with skin pores floating over the top. And the reason we're doing this way too, and I'm dodging and burning rather than blurring, is because I want to protect the pores. I want those pores to be there so the person actually looks like a real person and they don't look like a wax figure. And if we want to see how we're doing, what we can do is we can turn off this, and here's our dodge and burn. So we can see how we're starting to even out that skin, see that? That's the effect we're starting to have. Okay, let's go to the burn now. We're going to turn this on, and we're looking for areas that we want to darken down a little bit. And we might even want to zoom it out a little bit sometimes so we can see a little better. So we can see the overall toning. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little tip here. If we go under the window and we go under arrange, and then we go down here, we can choose new window for this session. So we're going to pop that open, and what it does is it just shows another window of that. So if we put these side by side, let me show you. Window, arrange, and we're going to tile these vertically. And then what we can do now is we can see a small version of it, a zoomed out version. Let me just pop that there. And also a close-up version so we can see what we're getting. So, you know, if we want to have an overall bird's eye view, we can see here, okay, there's certain areas we need to work on, and up close, because it kind of looks different sometimes when we're up close than it does when we're at a distance. So I'm looking here, where's some areas like maybe around here, up here, you know, it's a little too bright. Let me make that brush a little bigger. Just gonna drop that down. And a lot of the time too, I like to add a little shadow just around the hairline. It can look kind of nice too, just adding a little shape to that face. All right, so let's have a look and see what we've got here. So if we look at this and we look at the dodging and burning before and after, you can see what we've done. And if I turn off the grayscale, there's before and after. See what we're doing? We're just kind of evening up that skin. So we're starting to get pretty close here. Notice what I'm doing is just very, very subtle. We're not looking for big, drastic changes. We're looking for a very subtle, natural looking retouch. In fact, why don't we have a look and see the before and after where we are right now. If I go under here and I option click, that will hide all the other layers. There's before and there's after. Before, after. So you can see it's just little changes here to make things look better. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to do some really basic eye enhancement here. Now I have 2 whole videos on YouTube that show the full workflow for retouching eyes. Link in the description underneath. But let's have a look here. I'm going to create a new layer just above right there. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. Actually, yeah, let's get right in there. And I'm going to retouch that using our healing brush tool. Now I'm just going to make this really small. Now a lot of the time I don't touch these veins, to be honest. I'm just going to hit Alt Option and I'm going to go in here and just kind of reduce these a little bit. I've still got my subtle settings here, so I'm not trying to like completely get rid of these. I just want to reduce their appearance a little bit. And it's natural to kind of leave that in there, but if there's, you know, some excessive veins in there, you might want to kind of clean those up a little bit. And that's not bad. You know, we could look at the other eye. Maybe that one vein there is a little much. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to create an adjustment layer here, and I'm going to make it a hue saturation adjustment layer. So I'm going to create this hue saturation. I'm going to bring the saturation all the way to 0. I could use my grayscale layer, I guess. And then I'm going to inverse this. So you can control I, Command I to inverse it, or go down to properties and click invert. We'll get you the same thing. So we're hiding it. And all I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab my brush and I'm just going to paint with white right there. And I just want to paint away the color of those veins. In fact, why don't I bring my opacity all the way up, my flow all the way up, and we're just painting out the color here. Notice I'm not painting with white to make her look ghoulish. And now in the name of subtlety, what we're going to do is we're just going to reduce this all the way to 0. There's the original. And now I'm just going to pull it in a little bit just to kind of reduce it. Maybe round about there is looking pretty good. So if we looked at this before, there's the veins, and then after, it's just looking a little cleaner. So as you can see, we're going for a very natural looking retouching result, and these are the kind of tools that you just want to continue to use. Now, one of the things you may want to do to finish it off is to maybe do some color toning. I actually created another tutorial using color toning with gradient maps. Check that out in the link underneath. So as you can see there, a little bit goes a long way. Now, these techniques will work exactly the same for a younger person as they will for an older person. These are tried and true techniques for natural looking retouching. Now, sometimes you can go a little bit further, a little bit more crazy with some high-end fashion and different things like that, but that's not what this video is about. This video is about making people look natural. Their skin doesn't look like plastic or wax. Now, this is also really good if you're shooting stock. So if you photograph people, you can make some extra revenue by selling those photos on Adobe Stock. I've got a link underneath where you can sign up and become a contributor. It's very easy. Now you'll get your photos in front of millions of people and make some extra revenue. Just make sure that you have model releases for those photos that you upload. So these are good techniques to use when you're doing that retouching for stock, because the photo is going to look natural and people can apply their own stylization to them later on if they so choose. So anyway, if you like this video, smash that like button into dust. If you're new here and you haven't yet subscribed to Photoshop Cafe, hit that subscribe button right now, become part of the Cafe crew, and you'll get a new tutorial every single week. So anyway, guys, what do you think about this tutorial? Do you like this? What kind of things would you like to learn in the future? Don't forget to drop a comment into that comment section and we'll get a discussion going. And until next time, I'll see you at the cafe.